Good morning. I hope everyone's really good. All right. So, in an amazing group I'm in, a lady asked this question. Can anyone give advice? No, can't give advice. But can anyone give advice? St.George Bank want all my details. Do we have to give it to them? They say I have to do this by the 1st of June. So, yes, it's not just St. George, but St. George Bank is requiring customers to verify and update their identification details and other information by the 1st of June as part of their compliance with the Australian anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing laws. Are you a terrorist? Anyway, apparently, this is a legal obligation for all banks in Australia, not just St. George. So why do they say it is required? So St. George is mandated by who? To periodically confirm that the information they hold about you is up to date on your personal accounts. This includes verifying your identity, employment and contact details, as well as understanding the source of your funds and the purpose of your banking relationship. These are measures apparently in place to keep your accounts safe and to look after you and to comply with regulatory requirements. So, what information do they say you need to provide? So, you may be asked to confirm via a text message, by a message on your app, via an email, or a letter asking for a valid form of identification, such as a driving license, passport, Medicare card, birth certificate, your current employment and contact details, information about the source of your wealth, for example, long-term savings, inheritance, rental property. I just want to remind you that all these governing bodies speak to each other, okay? The purpose of your business relationship with the bank. Is it savings? Is it everyday transactions? And also they may ask if you have a foreign tax number, if applicable. Now, what happens if you do not comply? If you don't provide the requested information by the specific deadline, St. George may restrict your access to your accounts, including joint accounts, until the verification is completed. This is to ensure, apparently, the security and safety of your account and compliance with legal obligations. Now, are they legal obligations for you or the bank? Is it for your compliance or their compliance to keep their bank registration? But what if I don't want to provide a tax file number or private information on where my funds come from or my employment details, etc.? There must be something I can say. Before we get into that, let's watch this recent chat that was on mainstream Sky News, and then we can get back into it.
To an absolutely bizarre story now, and if you want to listen up, if you're with CommBank, you're gonna be aware of this. They've sent this email out to goodness knows how many thousands, perhaps millions of people with CommBank. It seems fairly innocuous at first. It's called Know Your Customer, and they just want to know more details about you, have a check in the pulse, see what you're after. Are you happy with our service? But read the fine print and you will be absolutely disgusted, as was Lewis Christopher. He's the founder of a respected property research firm. And upon reading this email, it was so invasive, he thought to himself, this has got to be a scam. This cannot be legitimate. The questions that they're asking me, he calls up the bank and to his utter disgust, he said, this thing's Orwellian. They said, no, it's legitimately from us. Particularly, they wanted to know why he had cash, because they knew that he'd made withdrawals. What are you doing with that cash? Why do you have cash in your home? He says, what I have just gone through this morning with CBA is disgusting. This is him telling the media about it. He said it's absolutely despicable, Orwellian stuff driven by AUSTRAC. AUSTRAC, for your information, is a financial intelligence agency. That should worry you straight off the bat. He said, just out of the blue, the bank sent me the enclosed email and demanded to know, 1, how have I built up my wealth? 2, why have I made cash withdrawals? 3, if I am holding cash at home, why? 4, why did I make certain transactions to third parties? He said, I called the bank and it was true. They were going to suspend all my accounts this week if I didn't tell them the answers to the above questions. They said AUSTRAC gave them the authority to do that. And get this pullout from their email. This is what they were threatening to do if he didn't answer those questions satisfactorily by end of week. This is the email from Commonwealth Bank. They threatened to remove your ability to use and access your account or accounts, remove your ability to use any linked cards, including at ATMs, at point of sales and online, remove your ability to view and access your account or accounts on NetBank and the CommBank app, and stop any scheduled transactions, direct debits, direct credits, or regular payments. This, of course, is all part of the push toward digital currency, digital banking. Now, did anyone vote for this? No, baby, but they want you to go digital, and they're not asking. Remember, just last financial year, we saw 200 bank outlets close here in Australia. Over the past 5 years, we saw 6,000 ATMs shut up shop in Australia. That is in just 5 years. We saw Australia's 1/3 of bank branches close. That's what that equates to. And more than half of Australia's ATMs. What is happening? Not just this massive breach of privacy, but these people's refusal to understand that cash is still very important to people. But of course, the authorities don't like that because they don't know how you're spending your money, when you're spending your money, where you are when you spent that money, or why you've spent that money. They're completely in the dark. They don't like it, and they're clamping down so hard, the bank has no shame sending you an email saying, you've made some withdrawals. Where is that cash? What are you doing with it? Is it at home? Why is it at home? Here was this fellow, Lewis Christopher, talking to Ross Greenwood this afternoon on Business Now.
When they went into demanding to know what I'm doing with cash, have I got cash at home?
Have you got cash at home? Why
like everybody else has a bit of cash at home.
That's right.
And then to ask why I've got cash at home.
Yes.
Like, hang on.
It seems bizarre.
And this is a security risk for me and my family.
I'm looking after my family. We need cash on hand. I mean, who among us doesn't have some cash on hand in the case of emergencies? We've seen even in recent months, the lines go down. There's full shopping trolleys at Woolies and everywhere else. People are suddenly unable to buy or do any kind of transaction because they don't have cash on hand.
The Commonwealth Bank of Australia have released a statement explaining what's happened. Here's their statement. They said, we're required to manage our customers' accounts in line with the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act 2006, which sets out that all banks operating within Australia are required to collect, verify and maintain customer identification information, which, Liz, raises the question, customer identification, how does knowing the amount of cash you've got
they know who he is
under your mattress,
he's got an account with
help
them.
the bank to identify you? How does the bank knowing why you gave money to a particular party help them to identify you. They've gone way beyond
Indeed.
their own statement, have they not?
You'd imagine most blokes, if they copped a call from the bank and said, what are you doing with all this cash? You'd say, please don't tell the missus. But I mean, for goodness sake, like AUSTRAC, the mob that drives all of this, which is a governmental department, they look after or monitor financial transactions. Their remit is to stop, money laundering and crime and this sort of thing, right? But for as long as I can get 17 calls a day from scammers, and I drive around parts of Sydney with pretty rundown houses with very expensive cars parked out the front of them, presumably not from legitimate business, why are they going after a legitimate businessman who's been successful? You can't tell me that there are not other things that they should be doing, 100 other things that should be in line before they start calling up legitimate, successful people and saying, you must tell us what you are doing with your money. It's no business of yours what I'm doing with my money. If I want to go and gamble it all away, I'm well within my rights to do that. We're talking about a legitimate businessman. And yet there are people running around dealing drugs and laundering money and whatever all day, every day. And as far as I know, they're not having their bank accounts frozen because they keep doing business. But this bloke who runs a legitimate business is being told, no, you'll get shut down unless you tell us where the money is under your bed.
Okay, now back to the question. What if I don't want to provide a tax file number or private information or where my funds come from or my employment, etc.? There must be something I can say. You can see Harkin popping into the video every second. All right, now, please remember, this is not advice. I'm just one concerned living woman chatting out loud with other concerned living men and women. You must make your own decisions based on critical thinking and your own discretion. Okay, so the lovely lady at the beginning of this who shared this question, you are absolutely right. While the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act 2006 requires banks like St.George to collect Know Your Customer KYC information, you are not legally required to provide certain pieces of information, such as your tax file number, right? You're not legally required to provide your tax file number. Now, banks often ask for it to avoid withholding tax at the highest marginal rate, but it is voluntary. If you don't provide your tax file number, the bank must apparently legally withhold tax from any interest earned on your account at the top marginal rate, currently at 47%. Now, if there's any accountants watching this or any lawful mentors who know more about this and the hows and whys, please share to educate us all. That would be really vital here. Now, one could respond with, I do not consent to disclose my tax file number. I am aware of the withholding implications and accept them. 47%. So if an accountant could chime in on this, that would be super. Okay. Now, sources of funds, wealth, employment info. This is not legally mandated to be provided in detail. Also, can someone chime in and let me know, is a mandate a law? Anyway, but banks are required to take steps to know the customer under AML and CTF rules, and we'll dig deeper into that in a minute. Maybe you could keep your responses broad and non-invasive. They're just personal savings. Purpose of account. Personal use. Okay, now you also actually don't need to provide pay slips, names of employers, or detailed financial records. The thing is, in the real world, what if you refuse entirely? Banks can technically choose not to do custom with you any longer because you're a customer of the bank. Can someone also share, once money goes into a bank account, is it our money? Who actually operates that money? Is it me or is it the bank? Banks can technically freeze or close your account if you don't provide any ID or KYC info as they request it. This is their risk-based discretion under AML CTF law. So this is really important at this point. We need to rewind on a few things. There are now pieces of legislation and laws that have passed. Now, most of us, these things happen while we're distracted. I don't know, I don't do this, but while most of the population are watching Love Island, or we're under so much stress and pressure about how to pay for the groceries this week, how to put fuel in the car, right? How to keep a roof over our head. They want us to be in strain, in stress, vulnerable, weak, fear. I'd love to hear anyone in the comments about that. So let's look at the laws. All right, little Harkin is sitting quietly at my feet. Let's see how long that lasts. So this is really important, right? To make educated, self-determined decisions, we need to educate ourselves. We need to be informed about all the details. We need to put all the pieces of the puzzle on the table in front of us. So, what are the AML CTF laws? This is not advice. I literally just looked this up myself. You can too. The Australian Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing laws are a set of federal laws that require certain businesses, especially banks, financial services and remitters, to deter, detect and report financial crimes, particularly money laundering, concealing the origins of illegally obtained money, and terrorism financing, using funds to support terrorist activities. So the lady who asked this question at the beginning that set this whole thing in motion this weekend, are you a terrorist? Are you a criminal? Now, these laws are enforced by AUSTRAC, the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Centre, a government agency. So if you do believe taxes are going to things in the government, are you funding this agency that is now asking you these questions? It monitors financial transactions for suspicious activity. The core law, the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financial Act 2006, is the main piece of legislation. It is also supported by AML CTF Rules Instrument 2007, which are the detailed regulations. If anyone wants to dive into that rabbit hole and put it here in the comments, oh, you're welcome to. Also, the Financial Sector Collection of Data Act 2001. There's also other supporting instruments like privacy rules and enforcement powers. Now, who must comply to this? Entities known as reporting entities under this Act include banks, for example, St.George, CBA, credit unions, building societies, money remitters, exchange services, cryptocurrency exchanges, superannuation providers, lawyers, members of the Bar Association, accountants. They are tax agents for the ATO. Accountants do not work for you. They work for the ATO. And also real estate agents. And yes, real estate agents also require their public license and registration to operate. In some contexts, they are also required to do this. Interesting. So what are they legally required to do? KYC, we've all heard of that, get to know your customer. Verify customer identity before opening an account or providing services. Ongoing monitoring of transactions and update customer details regularly. Also, suspicious matter reporting. Report if they suspect a transaction involves crime, fraud, or terrorism. Threshold transaction reporting. Report any cash, yes, cash transactions over $10,000. This is in Australia, so that's 10,000 Australian dollars. Why are they doing that? International funds transfer reporting. Report any transfers into or out of Australia, regardless of value. It could be $50, it could be $500,000. And risk-based systems access and manage the risk of customers being involved in illicit activity. That's why they may ask for info like sources of funds, occupation, etc. Now, what's not legally required from you? You do not need to provide your tax file number. It is voluntary. You do not need to disclose detailed private information unless flagged for risk, but then they flag it, right? They're choosing what is flagged. You do not need to provide your employment history unless it's directly relevant. Again, they choose if it is directly relevant. Now, these are our rights. For privacy, you can limit what you disclose and how it's used, but refusing everything may lead to restricted services, which means you just can't use your bank account. The money's locked in there, it's frozen. No tax file number penalty. They can withhold interest at the top rate, 47%, if you don't give your tax file number, but they cannot force you to give the tax file number. It's a bit like if you didn't get the COVID jab, oh, it's voluntary, but you can't work here anymore. Oh, it's voluntary, but you can't enter this tavern. Oh, it's voluntary, but you can't get on a plane. Complaints. You can complain. Apparently, we have the right to complain to the bank's ombudsman, to the OAIC Privacy Commissioner, or to AUSTRAC. I feel like there's a conflict of interest if we complain to AUSTRAC, though, if you feel your data is being abused. Okay, so we really need to look at who AUSTRAC is and who gives them. What is AUSTRAC and who gives them authority? AUSTRAC stands for the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Centre. It's an independent government financial intelligence unit and regulatory agency tasked with monitoring financial transactions, preventing money laundering and terrorism financing, collecting personal and financial data, enforcing compliance with the AML CTF Act of 2006. AUSTRAC claims to act as both. Okay, again, there are some beautiful lawful mentors who I follow and they follow me. I would really love you to share a little bit more about this, please. AUSTRAC claims to act as both A, the regulator setting and enforcing the rules, and B, the data collector agency sharing information with over 80 domestic and international agencies like the AFP, ATO, ASIC, and overseas authorities. Plus, didn't I just say before in the last bit that we can also complain to them? I'm seeing blurring of the lines here. Who created AUSTRAC? AUSTRAC was established under the Financial Transactions Reports Act of 1988 and later empowered under that Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act 2006 that we just spoke into. This act was passed by the Commonwealth Parliament of Australia, so its authority is claimed to come from the constitutional powers of the Parliament. Again, there are others who are really wise in this space that can share about just that line in itself. And the international treaties and obligations, such as the FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force Standards, and the UN Conventions Against Transnational Organised Crime and Terrorism Financing. Again, that's not my area. If someone wants to weigh in on that, please do so in the comments. But there's always a catch. Here's the catch. AUSTRAC is not part of the judicial system. It's an executive agency, part of the Commonwealth Public Services. Like it's a department, okay? But it's not a government department. It's just like a little agency. It's like the little food truck in the corner. Okay. Now, it's operating under which government department? It operates under the Attorney General's Department. So that has nothing to do with, it's not under the ATO or ASIC, it's over here. Okay. With no direct oversight by you, the people, unless challenged in court or via administrative review. It enforces legislation on assumption that all citizens are persons under Commonwealth law. So we're legal fictions subject to corporate acts. Please, if you can share more detail about everything I've just said there, please do in the comments, because let's be sponges of learning, right? Let's make self-determined decisions after we've looked at all the pieces of, of the puzzle. All right, what are we going to look at next? Challenging their authority. Do they even have authority? But let's look at challenging their authority. Look, from a lawful, natural law perspective, yes, you can. We really need to look at a couple of things here. Whether AUSTRAC has lawful standing, whether compliance is based on contractual consent. For example, you opened a bank account with terms you never negotiated, okay? We also need to look at whether the agency's reach extends only to statutory persons, right? Because most of us are living privately and honourably. But in commercial legal terms, AUSTRAC apparently holds considerable power. It can direct banks to freeze accounts, report you, or demand identification under the guise of national security or AML risk. And non-compliance can lead to loss of access to banking infrastructure. I would like to know if one has had their banks frozen due to this, right? Restricted access to the accounts. Say you have $20,000 sitting in this personal bank account. Do they just choose not to do custom with you and then let you have the 20 grand, or do they freeze it? And again, I know there are some really amazing mentors out there who know a lot more about this than me. Please share, because your wisdom is really appreciated. Okay, are we done? No, there is more. There is another piece that plays a really important part in forcing us to fill in the get to know your customer. And this is something that I've been talking about for a long time. Those of you who know me, wait to hear what I'm about to say, because I share this a lot. FATCA. I probably say FATCA 20 times a week in yarns with living men and women. It's the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. Now, I'm not an accountant, heaven forbid. There are a lot of fake accountants out there, and there are a lot of really amazing, qualified, chartered, wise accountants out there. I don't fit into any of those categories, but I do have wise counsel who share with me often. So I'm just sharing out loud information based on just data, okay? I'm not giving advice in any way. The Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, it's a United States federal law passed in 2010. It's designed to detect US citizens hiding money overseas, force foreign banks and financial institutions like St. George to report on accounts held by US persons, extend US tax jurisdiction globally through contract-based compliance. Oh, I love the old US of A. So, the key features of FATCA. Okay, so it applies globally. Any non-US bank with US account holders must comply. So if there's a bank and they have 500,000 account holders, if 5 of them are US citizens, doesn't matter. This is just blanket, all right? This is blanket compliance. Banks must identify and report on US persons holding accounts. Again, how does that affect this lady in Australia? Just wait. 30% withholding tax on US sourced income if institutions don't comply. Non-US citizens are also affected through contagion. So there's a blanket compliance. There's more ID demands, income disclosures, and cross-checking over everyone. So how does this affect Australia? Australia signed an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with the US in 2014. This IGA requires Australian financial institutes to 1. Identify US persons using bank systems and customer data, 2. Report financial account information to the ATO, and 3. The ATO then sends this to the US Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. This setup is part of what's known as the Automatic Exchange of Information, AEOI, aligned with CRS, Common Reporting Standard, a global data sharing regime modelled on FATCA, or I just talked about. Why does this even matter, even if you're not American? Because although this FATCA Act in the US technically targets US persons, it has expanded KYC protocols for everyone globally. So it's also, we're like frogs in boiling water. It's helped normalize invasive data collection, even for locals. It's driven banks to implement strict ID checks and demand declaration about your tax residency, sources of wealth, etc. So, back to the very beginning of this. When St. George asks you for private details, they may not mention FATCA. However, a lot of us have seen a lot of bank forms actually mentioning FATCA, but their policies are shaped by it and its global offspring, like the Common Reporting Standard. So while FATCA doesn't directly require you to do anything unless you are a US citizen, what it's done is it's enabled the culture of forced compliance, heavy surveillance, and erosion of financial privacy, and banks like St. George are under the thumb of that system. Most of you who know me know I've been bantering about FATCA when completing forms at banks for years. So I'm always up for a yarn and a cup of tea, right? My metaphoric door is always open. You can DM me on Insta, right? The name of my YouTube channel is the same name as my Instagram account. If you would like a one-on-one chat about this stuff, we can look at options. There's remedies, right? I don't give advice. I'm just sharing concerned living women to concerned living men and women, all right? This is not a templated cookie cutter approach. We are all individual humans. My thumbprint, for example, is different to your thumbprint. So why should your modus operandi be templated? Anyway, that just came to me then. But please comment your thoughts. You know, I really want everyone, this is such an important discussion. Send me a DM, share your thoughts in the comments. This needs to be looked at because the implications of this when it comes to the demise of cash, when it comes to centralized systems, when it comes to 15-minute cities, the ripple effect is massive. Right. Also, I say this all the time. I'm just talking out loud, just asking questions, right? It's just giving something for us to talk about. Now, what can we do? I'm all about, let's not focus on what we can't do. Let's focus about what we can. What can we do? I have a beautiful friend and mentor. She's an amazing lawyer, and she's actually currently involved in a class action against Commonwealth Bank of Australia regarding this very issue. So if you want to know more about that, let me know. She runs a fabulous organisation advocating for living men and women. So yes, please let me know. And I have asked her to watch this because I know that she might be able to add to the discussion, even correct me on a couple of things. I only know what I know till I know something more, and that's for all of us. Now, if anyone feels aligned to respond to the bank's request for further particulars, look, you could say the money is for your cocaine habit or for your weekly stripper club visits. For those who know me, they go, they'd laugh, right? It's polar opposite of my values, but you could say that, right? Or you could respond in writing in a very polite, respectful, but firm position. This isn't advice. These are just hypothetical thoughts, right? This is a think tank. Let's brainstorm. To the St. George Compliance Department, I acknowledge receipt of your request for updated information. As a private individual, I reserve my right to privacy and do not wish to disclose my tax file number or detailed information relating to my income sources, employment status, or private affairs. I confirm that the funds in my accounts are of lawful origin and are used solely for personal purposes. I am not engaged in any activity that would trigger obligations under the AML CTF Act beyond standard customer verification. I request that my banking relationship continue uninterrupted on this basis and that no adverse action be taken as I remain compliant with my lawful obligations. Respectfully. Now, what are my final thoughts? There's always more going on, right? When banks like St. George demand your private data because of AML CTF laws or under the shadow of FATCA CRS and AUSTRAC, it's easy to assume it's just national government overreach. Okay, it is. But we also need to ask ourselves, who is leaning on the governments? Who is enforcing pressure on the banks? And who sets the stage globally for this compliance theatre? Could there be a bigger picture? Yes. And here's the full lens, just from my humble thoughts on a Sunday. All right. So let's look at this layer of the banks. They act as enforcers of surveillance, but under pressure from regulators, creditors, and global treaties, right? We're looking at who's pulling the strings. The governments, they sign the treaties, pass the laws, but they don't often originate the agenda. Then there's the global bodies, IMF, World Bank, OECD, FATF, BIS. These entities design frameworks and push nations to adopt them. So who are the controllers really? A nation? I think it's bigger than that. What if there was a network of unelected planners and financiers not accountable to any nation or constitution, setting the tempo for global financial governance? Global financial governance. I mean, let's think about some examples of this. global control architecture. We saw so much of this happening in the last half a decade, right? The Financial Action Task Force, it's not a government of any nation, but it dictates compliance policies to over 200 countries. OECD and CRS, they are not democratic, yet forces data sharing mandates between governments. The World Economic Forum, it influences banking policy under the guise of inclusive finance, ESG ratings, and digital ID integration. And Bank for International Settlements, BIS, known as the Central Bank of Central Banks, deeply involved in digital currency planning and cross-border settlement architecture. Again, I know more about strawberries and tea than any of this, so please weigh in the comments about this. Great minds think alike. Jump in. So what's the tunnel? What's tunneling these action items? Is there a long game here on planet Earth? Right? The aliens are out there eating their popcorn, watching this. Consider this sequence. 1, mandate ID compliance. Get to know your customer. 2, push global data sharing through FATCA, CRS, AML, CTF laws. 3, digitalize all financial transactions, a cashless economy. 4, link financial access to behavior, status, compliance, social credit systems, for example, right? And then what have I put here? Yeah, I was thinking about this last night. Number 5, make access to banking conditional on political and biometric alignment. This is not about your safety. It is about control infrastructure. So who's really overreaching here? It's not just your local government. It's not just your bank. It's the global networks who use banking systems as enforcement arms, right? They get to choose to cut off your oxygen or not, with the ultimate aim of eliminating privacy, self-determination, and freedom of the soul, basically, and autonomous living for living men and women. They create the illusion of national compliance for your safety. But the instructions come from much higher and further away, right? The puppeteers, and often from those who hold no allegiance to your country or political party or local council, right? They don't hold any allegiance to the people of that nation or to your values. Like I said earlier, I'm all about what we can do. Let's not focus on what we can't do. Okay, so while I'm on planet Earth, we need real life practical remedies. Okay, this isn't about exiting some matrix or trying to get out of something or exiting a system. I'm sorry, but it's not really realistic when I walk out my front door. So there's many things that we can do. You know, we can look at reclaiming our lawful identity outside the public person, outside of that all caps name, okay? We could operate privately wherever possible under trusts, unincorporated associations, as long as they're backed on international law ratified in the country that you're in. We could look at bartering, community trade. We could stay outside of their contract web by not consenting to terms you don't fully comprehend. And you know what we can do? And this is why I stayed up last night writing all these notes. We can expose and educate. The system is most powerful when it goes unquestioned. Anyway, I appreciate you. And please join in this conversation, because that's what's needed. A really outspoken, loud conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do subscribe to this channel because this is part of a project of a private membership association being of service to our members and therefore the wider community. Being of service, right? Everything's energy. Have a beautiful day. Bye.